It starts with silence. The kind of silence only found deep in the forest, heavy, ancient, alive, a cathedral of trees rising like sentinels, their branches woven tightly against the sky. Somewhere in the stillness, a single rustle, a tremble of leaves, then a sound so small it barely touches the air, a whimper. He couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, just a ball of fur, trembling, eyes too wide for a face so young. No mother, no warmth, just cold ground and colder fear. His tiny claws pressed into the earth, but they offered no anchor. He didn't understand why she was gone. He only knew she wasn't coming back. And when hikers stumbled onto him, alone, motionless, almost invisible beneath a tangle of brush, they weren't sure at first if he was even real or alive, but his eyes blinked, just once, a silent cry, and that was enough. Enough to send a pulse of urgency through the air, enough to call in the rangers, the biologists, the rehabbers, all the hands that hold the invisible threads of life between species. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to be surrounded by something he'd never felt before. A team. At first, they watched, quietly, waiting, hoping the mother would return. Every hour stretched thin with anxiety. But dawn came, then dusk, and still, no mother, just a cub who had stopped crying, as if even he had accepted that he had been left behind. When they finally moved in, they moved with reverence, not rushing, not startling. They knew that every second mattered, but they also knew that every touch could alter the course of his future. He needed help, but he also needed to remain wild. They wrapped him gently, not in arms, but in layers of careful anonymity. No eye contact, no voices, just warmth, just presence. They held him like he was something sacred, something borrowed from the wild. And in many ways, he was. He was critical from the start. Fragile in every sense of the word, underweight, dehydrated, confused. His breath came in short, hesitant puffs, but they were breaths. And for the team, that was everything. The first step in a long, uncertain journey. They didn't name him. Naming makes things personal. Naming makes you hold on when you're supposed to let go. And the goal was always to let go, not emotionally, but literally, to release him, back into the wild, back into the story he was born for. But first, he had to survive. He was placed in an enclosure designed to mimic the den he never got to grow up in. Soft bedding, heat pads disguised as fur-covered stuffies, scents of pine and soil, and always, the bear suit. An odd-looking thing from the outside, a full-body costume with fur and a sculpted snout. But to the cub, it was everything. It was mother, it was comfort, it was safety without the imprint of a human face. They wore it every time they fed him, every time they cleaned his space, every time they checked his vitals, never letting him see a human figure, never letting him hear a human voice. The world outside that enclosure would not be his future. They would not let him fall in love with hands that could never follow him into the wild. And so, the team became ghosts, shadows, bear-like silhouettes in the periphery of his world. They were his protectors, his providers, his silent guardians, and slowly, he began to respond. The first time he ate without coaxing, it felt like a miracle. The slow, cautious lapping of formula, the almost imperceptible way his body relaxed. It wasn't just nourishment. It was trust, a thread, a bridge between fear and survival. He played cautiously at first, tentative, unsure, but then one day, he curled up beside the warm stuffed bear they'd left for him and slept with his paw wrapped around its neck. That was the moment they knew. He wasn't just surviving, he was beginning to feel safe. But healing is never a straight line. Some days, he cried out, a low, confused bleat that echoed off the walls and clung to the hearts of everyone who heard it. He was looking for someone, not the suit, not the scent, his mother, the one who had disappeared without goodbye, the one who was supposed to teach him how to be a bear. That's when they brought in the lion scent. Strange, maybe, but effective. They'd learned that the smells of wild predators, lions, tigers, even other bears, could help reawaken a cub's instincts. Not fear, but caution, wariness, survival. So they rubbed the scents into the suits, into the bedding, into the walls of his world. They surrounded him with the presence of a wilderness he needed to understand, long before he could live in it. And something shifted. He became more alert, less clingy, more curious. His movements grew purposeful, not frantic. He stopped crying at night. He started foraging for the food they'd scattered for him, rather than waiting to be fed. It was subtle, but unmistakable. He was remembering who he was supposed to be. The days grew longer, warmer. Spring unfurled across the mountains like a second chance. And the cub, now stronger, steadier, surer, moved with it. He climbed for the first time, clumsy but determined. His paws fumbled over bark. His balance wobbled, but he didn't give up. He clung, he climbed, and he roared, a tiny, raspy, hilarious attempt at a sound too big for his body. But they heard it, and they smiled, though he'd never see it, because it meant he was ready for the next step. A larger enclosure, more natural, trees, logs, dirt, real weather, real wind, the smells of other animals drifting in from the nearby woods. It was the closest he'd been to freedom, and he took to it like it was in his blood. Because it was. He chased bugs, he rolled in mud, he stood on his hind legs and sniffed the sky. Everything he was meant to do, he did, without instruction, without hesitation. It was like the forest called to something ancient inside him, and he remembered. He remembered what it meant to be wild. The team watched from afar, behind cameras, behind fences, never too close, never long enough to become familiar. This wasn't about them, it was about him, and soon, it would be time, not yet, but soon. The release process was delicate. Months of preparation, evaluations, behavior assessments, all of it guided by one goal. Could he survive without them? Could he eat? Could he evade predators? Could he find shelter? Could he live? The answer came not in data, but in a moment. One morning, he refused to go near the enclosure door when the suited caretaker entered. He didn't whimper, he didn't reach, he didn't look back, he didn't need them anymore. And that was the most beautiful heartbreak they had ever known. They came for him just after sunrise. No crowds, no fanfare, just the rustle of leaves and a sky that hadn't quite decided whether to be blue or gold. The caretakers moved in quietly, calmly, like they always had. This time, they didn't wear the suit. They didn't need to. He didn't come to them. And that was the point. They gently coaxed him into the transport crate, padded with straw and silence. A quiet ride through winding forest roads. The trees getting taller, the air getting colder, wilder. They drove toward the edge of everything, the place where care ends and freedom begins. And when they opened the crate, he didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He stepped out into the forest like he belonged there, not like a guest, like a native son. The wind wrapped around him, and he paused, just once, to sniff the air. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe memory, maybe instinct, maybe both. And then he was gone. One paw after another, disappearing into the underbrush. No goodbye, no glance back, just the quiet parting of branches behind him, and the echo of a life they helped save, but could never keep. They stood there in silence for a long time after. Because even though this was always the dream, it still felt like letting go of a child you never got to hold. But they didn't cry. They smiled, the kind of smile that stretches past your heart and into your bones. Because they had done it. Together, they'd given him a chance, not just to survive, but to live. He'll never know their names. He'll never know the hands that fed him, the hearts that ached for him, the people who dressed like bears so he could stay wild. And that, too, is the point. This was never a story about what humans could teach a bear. It was a story about how far we're willing to go to help something return to what it was always meant to be.